Welcome back to the Draft Lab here on CBS Sports Network. We're talking O-line with me, Mike Renner, Kyle Long, joining the show. And we're going to go through my top 10, and you're going to give your takes on it. I'm going to run through these guys, give a little explanation for each, and then you're going to tap in and tell me who's too high, who's too low, who's just right. Here it is on the screen. Kelvin Banks Jr. I have met number one because to me he's just like the cleanest. Across the board, I poked the fewest holes in his game, I think. I think that guy's just a clean, good offensive tackle at the NFL level. More than enough traits to succeed. I want him on my football team. Armand Membu's not far behind, though. I have these guys very close in my final rankings. Membu is much more of a freak. I think he's a little less polished, I'd say. Just doesn't look as clean on a play-for-play basis, but like when his high-end stuff is higher end than anyone else in this draft class. Unbelievable athlete. Just draft him. He'll go top 10, in my opinion. Will Campbell is after them because I do see him as a guard. We've talked about his wingspan issues.
Tweener.
The fact that he will have the shortest wingspan of any tackle in the NFL if he does play offensive tackle, and that matters. And it's ratioed up against speed at the collegiate level. Tyler Booker I have at 4, the big, brutish offensive guard for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I don't really worry about his combine numbers. They weren't great. His RAS score, RAS, relative athletic score, not ideal, but it's a guard. And he's a phone booth guard. He's not a zone scheme sort of guard. So it's
just a guard.
It's a guard.
Continue.
Josh Simmons at 5, the Ohio State tackle. Again, injury playing a factor there. Without the injury, if he plays the whole season with the way he looked the first 5 games of the year at Ohio State, man, he could have been 3 on this list for me. I loved his tape, but a patellar tendon tear is a big, big injury. Gray Zabel from North Dakota State comes in at 6. He's a tackle there who's going to play on the interior at the NFL level. Probably your best center. If you're drafting a center in this draft class, it's probably Gray Zabel. Josh Connerly, Oregon tackle. We're at the point where he's the first guy I'm describing as a project. I think every guy before this is a day one starter. I could see Connerly being the first guy where I'm like, maybe he sits year one, right? Maybe you're drafting him kind of like a Maris Mims last year where you could start him if you really have to, but I'm probably drafting him if I am with a plan that he's a backup day one. Donovan Jackson, the guard / tackle from Ohio State. Loved his tape at guard, but I think what I saw from him at tackle at the end of the season, I think he could play there. He's got the size, he's got the length, he's got the athleticism to do it. He's number 8 on this list. Charles Grant is the biggest wild card in this draft, in my opinion, on the offensive line. The best athlete of any guy. The guy moves easier than anyone else out of William & Mary, but we didn't get to see him at Senior Bowl, didn't get to see him at the Combine. If he would have had that, if he would have been healthy for those, I think a lot more people would know this guy's name than they do right now. And then Wyatt Milam comes in at number 10. We're going to discuss him here in a little bit because we both are fans of his game. But offensive tackle turned guard. He will be a guard, in my opinion, or a center at the next level. So give me your takes, Kyle. I'm very excited to hear these. Who's too high? Who's too low? Who's just right? Just what do you got for me?
So I think we're going to start with the too high, and I'm going to put Kelvin Banks. And just because you said, first off, I love the list. There's not much I disagree with, but we were asked by our producers to do too high, too low, just right, which is a game that I enjoy playing. And just because I like being a contrarian, I'm going to say your number one guy is too high. You said he's the guy that you can poke the least amount of holes in his game. And while I appreciate that and everything he did at Texas, I do think he's a great football player, and I'll get to his game in a second. The too low player is going to be Wyatt Milam. Okay? Wyatt Milam, West Virginia. His position, dog. Ass kicker. And just right is Charles Grant. And he's down there at the bottom of your top 10 list. But I think
not a lot of top 10s.
With the fact that he has such positional versatility, he hasn't had the opportunity to week in, week out play against the best of the best. I think the room and the opportunity for growth is huge for Charles Grant. And I think his athleticism, the proof's in the pudding with guys like Lane Johnson who can run effortlessly, move laterally with great efficiency, get away from the line of scrimmage at will. That's what Charles Grant has. And you said guard, tackle, wherever. And there's a lot of these guys in the draft that are going to be coming out that can play a lot of positions. But we're going to start with Kelvin Banks here. I'll go down the list. I've got my note cards on the watermelon stationery. I'm just going to tell you some of the things that I wrote down that jumped off the film. For Kelvin Banks, great balance in the run game. That's what I wrote first.
Yes.
Really plus pulling inside. A lot of guys, they look lost in there. They don't know the best way to get their body into the A, B, or C gaps or trapping across the formation. This guy, Kelvin Banks, is under control. He understands leverage. He understands what's going on out there. Great leverage and angles at the second level and screens. He's 6'4", I wrote as one of my bullet points. I don't know what I was thinking in that very moment, but I was writing his height down. He plays a quiet game, which to me might be why I have him as too high, because there was nothing that was extraordinary about him, but he's just out there getting the job done. Ryan Clady was a guy that played and protected Jay Cutler before I got into the league, and Jay always talked about watching Ryan Clady, and he said it was the most boring game he'd ever watched. Guys would just go out there and they'd get lost in him. He'd find a way to tactically put him down. Nothing too explosive, nothing too flashy. That's this Kelvin Banks fellow. Great play strength, great anchor. Guys get lost in his chest, and he has a feel for the outside hand strike. One thing that we're going to talk about is independent hand usage versus two-hand striking. This is a guy who understands where to place that outside hand, protects his inside with the inside hand. I love that. The concerns, leans in the run and pass at times. You saw him get push-pulled a couple times.
Yes.
You saw the same thing?
Easily his biggest thing. Easily his biggest worry, in my opinion.
Push-pull. That's that waist bend. Once you figure out how to put your... I'm going to say this because we're talking O-line. Once you figure out how to put your balls on somebody, that means get your hips to a guy and not be a waist bend. When you waist bend, your butt goes out, your head goes forward, and then what's coming at you can yank you down to the ground. When Kelvin Banks figures out how to put his balls on some guys, no offense to any of our listeners who are offended by that, it's going to be a lot better for his game. Good TE and ET recognition, and then I wrote, he may be a lefty. I think that outside hand came up again in film, and I was like, this guy may just be left-handed and throws a great left straight.
I'll say this about that balance concern, and I agree wholeheartedly, and that's been like the biggest. You just read other scouting reports, that's what people highlight the most, and he does, especially in the running game, in like a phone booth, get swam otherwise, and like it's out over his toes. But why I'm not super worried about it, and why I think it's more technical than just innate poor balance, is like when I see him on the move. You mentioned him pulling, just out in the move on screens, him like sifting between different assignments.
That's a feel thing.
That to me is like real athletic balance, is the guy that can change directions and never lose balance. And so I think it's more of a technical, once he learns to not be so out over his toes in the running game or in pass pro and sit back on his haunches more, it's not an innate lack of balance. It's just technique thing. So that's
and he'll definitely figure all this stuff out. And when you talk about guys in space, I weigh that more like when a guy shows balance in space, middle or end of the drive, particularly on these tunnel screens where you've got to go inside the defensive end and peel left at a 45-degree angle or a 90-degree angle down the sideline. When you can show balance and have a good plan there, it speaks volumes about not only your conditioning, because you've been run blocking, pass blocking the last 6 plays, and then they tell you to go run your fat ass out there and block the cornerback. That's hard. That's one of the hardest play calls to hear in the huddle, because it's like, oh, we're running Raptor or Laker again. Like, are you kidding me? I'm beat. Well, this guy can do it, and he looks relatively simple and easy doing it. The second guy, Armand, is it Membo or Mem?
I've been saying Membu.
Membu. I'll stick with Membu. All I wrote, the first thing I wrote, all caps, love him. Wholly strong, seems like he has real fast twitch traits and explosive strength. I watched him play against UGA, and it looked like an NFL game out there. It looked like that level of physicality. This is a guy, unlike Charles Grant, who has played against all these top-tier players. The thing that stood out to me about Membu is he has multiple types of pass sets. He has a mixed bag of technical abilities to get different jobs done, whether it's a wide 9, tight 5, a 7 technique. Does he have a tight end next to him? Does he have a running back with him in protection? Is the guard going to be in his hip pocket? This guy can hit you with vertical set. He can do that play action quick, get on you quick. I'm going to run block you in the pass. He does a 45-degree set, which is great. Clearly, somebody taught this guy, coached him up young, and it stuck to him. So, in my opinion, he has the freak twitch, explosive, and strength, but he's also got that mental to go along with it. He has a tendency to open the gate on his vertical set. So, when I say open the gate, that means, I'm going to actually stand up for this one. I'm going to take off my IFB. So,
narrate.
When you see an offensive tackle go with the vertical set, I'm just going with this leg. I'm going straight back. This is for a wide rusher that's outside of me. This is if I have maybe a blitzing linebacker at the second level that's creeping up to the line of scrimmage. He may be the guy that comes, and this guy may drop out. So I have to stay here with my pressure key, hand. If anything comes, I take it over. But I also have to maintain visibility key for him. The only way you can keep your strength is if you stay square. When you see guys open up for these edge rushers, that's when you become a bull candidate. That's when the bull rush starts to come into place. They can work outside to underneath, and I see that, unless he cleans it up, being an issue. But none of these guys are without issues.
That was Andrew Thomas, rookie year, New York Giants. Awful at that. Yeah, he just had a terrible habit of doing that, and he got his ass kicked.
It's something that happened to me too.
Figured it out.
When I got a 5 or a 4-eye when I was a guard, they'd kick out to 5 technique. So Seattle did it with Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett. Yeah. They'd both line up outside the offensive tackle, and they'd force both the right guard and the right tackle to take a tackle vertical set. And if you're not on your P's and Q's, you're in trouble. So Membu gets great depth in his set versus Texas A&M. He handled all comers. UGA felt like an NFL game. Dense play side double team, and his eyes are right. So those are the last bit of notes I had on him. Freak show. This guy's only to get better.
20 years old. 20 years old.
Stud.
And I'll say this: the track record of offensive linemen whose tape's good, but then they also have elite traits. That's just a good track record. It's a good track record. Give a quick take on Will Campbell, and then we're going to get to break and get to
Sorry.
Get through the last 7 here real quick.
Will Campbell, there's a handful of athletes that can excel at any and all positions on the O-line in this league. Will Campbell is one of them. Fantastic ability to lower his center of gravity and understanding of force through the ground, which means being grounded through your feet and being able to develop strength. In pass and run, could be a year 1 Pro Bowl type guard and more than serviceable tackle early in his career, even with the concerns about his length. Plays like a Harry Heastan prospect. That's what I wrote, which is the ultimate sign of respect for a football player to say that he plays like Heastan taught him. Knuckles up, puncher, strikes with his knuckles up, run and pass. Love that. He's a leader. We've all heard him speak at the podium. He says you could be working at Amazon tomorrow if you don't get your guy blocked. He's honest. You need a little bit of that. It seems like he's from the old CBA.
He's a real sneaky 320 too. I mean, he looks on tape trim, but then when he locks in on guys, like, he's got some juice behind him.
I also wrote, the coaches may call him Gumby because of his ability to just bend. You see him take on bull rushes and recover from really shitty situations as an offensive lineman and out-athlete the situation with flexibility and bend. You can't coach that. Can't teach that.